For most of us, the first Monday in September is a benign marker for the end of summer, a day for neighborhood barbecues, closing the pool, and scrolling through a barrage of retail clearance ads. Ironically, on a day designed to honor the American worker, thousands of retail employees spend the holiday pulling grueling 12-hour shifts to support those very sales. Beneath the modern festivities lies a much darker foundation. To find the source of Labor Day, we have to look back at a century defined by dynamite, blood, and a desperate struggle for control over the American workplace. The American Industrial Revolution was an economic engine fueled by human exhaustion. In the late 19th century, the standard workweek spanned 7 days, with shifts lasting up to 16 hours in environments where safety was non-existent. Exploitation was the baseline. Wages were kept so low that survival often required sending young children into mills and mines, where they performed dangerous manual labor to keep their families from starving. Federal labor protections didn't exist. Left with no legal safety net and no political voice, the working class had to find a way to force change from outside the system. On September 5, 1882, the Central Labor Union organized what we now call the First Labor Day. At the time, this wasn't a sanctioned holiday. It was a clandestine, unauthorized strike. 10,000 workers walked off their jobs in New York City, forfeiting a day's pay and risking immediate termination. They marched toward Union Square to demand the radical concept of an 8-hour workday. That first parade was a massive act of grassroots defiance. By flooding the streets in such numbers, they provided a terrifying visual proof to the political establishment. Organized labor had the power to shut down the gears of commerce. Over the next decade, that momentum forced 23 individual states to recognize the September holiday, yet the federal government remained unmoved, refusing to grant it national status. Washington watched a volatile threat sweeping the globe, May Day. Born from Chicago's Haymarket Affair, it rapidly became the international workers' holiday. Politicians saw May 1st as an existential threat, a rally point for radical anarchism, fearing that direct action would ignite a systemic revolution. By the mid-1890s, the government was trapped between an escalating domestic labor crisis and a global socialist wave. It was a powder keg that only needed a specific flashpoint to explode. That flashpoint arrived in 1894 with the Pullman Strike. The Pullman Palace Car Company had slashed worker wages by 25% while refusing to lower the rents in its rigid corporate-owned town. Eugene V. Debs and the American Railway Union responded with a massive national boycott. Within days, over 200,000 workers halted rail traffic across 27 states, effectively paralyzing the United States economy. President Grover Cleveland responded with absolute force. He deployed federal military troops into Chicago to break the boycott and force the trains to move, bypassing local authorities and escalating the violence. The military intervention was deadly. Dozens of striking workers were killed in the ensuing clashes, and millions of dollars in property were reduced to ash and twisted steel. Cleveland had crushed the strike, but he faced an immediate political catastrophe. It was an election year, and he had just authorized the slaughter of the working-class voters he desperately needed to stay in power. Cleveland needed a conciliatory gesture to repair his image. He had to appease the furious labor movement without actually granting any of the radical concessions the workers were dying for. The legislative response was incredibly fast. Days after federal troops entered Chicago, Cleveland signed the bill making Labor Day a national holiday. The choice of the September date was a calculated move. By elevating the September parade over the May Day protests, the state provided a safe, nationalistic alternative intended to redirect worker energy away from global socialism. Eventually, the government would attempt a total historical erasure, declaring May 1st Loyalty Day to permanently distance the American worker from the radical origins of the global labor movement. Even though it began as a political maneuver, the labor movement turned that opening into tangible progress. Over the decades, their continued strikes secured the weekend, the 40-hour workweek, and the end of child labor. These victories have since been sanitized into the version of Labor Day we know now, a long weekend defined by consumer leisure and retail sales. Labor Day survives as a hard-fought truce between capital and the state. It stands as a monument to progress, paid for, in full, by the sweat and blood of the 19th century American worker.